Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. You've got our co-host for the weekly, Jon Henninger.
And the host, Jared Leckrone.
We are super glad and pumped. I'm pumped.
Wow.
Isn't that a funny saying? You're pumped.
Yeah.
What is that? Like,
I don't know.
Where does that come from? Anyway, before we get on the tangent, you've got episode number 68 of the Central Weekly. We've got a great episode because we're going to be talking about Jesus and the storms and the Savior. And it's really a great lesson. And if you've been through some hard times, meaning everyone, you're going to like this. If you didn't have a chance, go to our YouTube page or centralnow.com/media, listen to the sermon in its entirety. But again, we're going to talk in some generalities. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that sermon yet, you're still going to get a lot out of our episode because we just want to take a deeper dive in the boat world. They dive off a boat.
It's a diving boat, scuba boat, if you will.
Or we got some fun things.
Very nice, yes. Jared.
What we're going to do here, and then we've got two guests that are going to sit down with us for the Central Weekly. We've got Michael and Angie Smith.
Mike and Angie Smith,
and,
owners of Bagels and Brews.
And so, I mean, that's the funny thing, because I told them this. I really wanted to talk to them because I wanted to talk Bagels and Brews. I want to talk coffee.
Sure.
And just a little bit about the background with the shop and small business owners from Cesar. But really, somebody goes, wow, you don't know their story? I'm like, no, not really. They've got a story to tell.
They really do have a good story to tell.
Yeah. And it's really neat that this is the week that they told it. A week about, you're talking about storms of life. Both have been blown about with some really heavy storms in their life. And I'm excited for them to share it. Not because I like to just dish on bad stories, but I like to hear testimonies of how God has seen people through it.
Sure.
And I mean, they've got a life that they're cruising again.
Oh my goodness. It is just maritime example after.
But really great hearts for both Michael and Angie, and I'm excited about this conversation. So make sure you stay tuned for segment 2 and 3, because their last questions that we ask them is, how is God working in their life lately? And they've got some great things to share with us. So we're going to talk boats, week 3. We talked first week was Noah.
With Bagels and Brew, did they tell you the whole story?
But yeah.
Get it?
Yeah,
all right,
because it's
carry
a bagel.
on.
Yeah. Week two. What last week we talked about that I wasn't here. I mean, I was in the podcast, but yeah, I took a weekend. Okay, anyways, we talked about Jonah, and it really was. That was one that really stuck with me a lot, just because there were so many practical points about, hey, not being judgy of other people's lifestyles, but also knowing that they need to be accountable for it, but we're accountable for our judgment. It was just a really good lesson
to me. Just in studying it and in preparation to preach it, it was. I found myself identifying with Jonah more than I ever had before. You know, like his resistance to the call wasn't really so much he didn't want to answer what God was asking him to do. It was he didn't want to see God do what he always does.
Yep. It is a lesson
on behalf of people that he didn't like.
It is a lesson on the other side of boat-obedience. Boat-obedience Noah, great. Boat-obedience Jonah, not so great.
Not so great.
Not so great. So this week we're going to look at two other common. Here's the crazy thing. You said, we're going to look at two storms and Jesus.
Yeah.
He's in both of them.
Right.
50 times just in the New Testament. That's great that boats are mentioned. Yeah. Why are there not thousands of boats lesson series at churches everywhere?
You would wonder, why have other people not got on board with this series? Yeah. But yeah, no, exactly. 50 times in the New Testament, boats are mentioned. And I think it's, like I said in the sermon, I think it's just really cool. Not that we need it, but I think it is very cool. And why wouldn't science support scripture sometimes?
I like that. It was so funny that you talked about that, because you were looking at the Sea of Galilee and they found a boat that was dated at the same time where Jesus would have been on the Sea of Galilee too.
They found it in 1986, so not all that long ago.
Not that long, because I'm 36 and that's how old. Yeah.
Okay. And so, I just think it's really cool that they found that and they were able to kind of recreate what the boat would have actually looked like out of that.
And it's both of these storms happen on the Sea of Galilee. Both of the storms that we're going to talk about. And to me, if you can get a little of these two confused, I think. One, they're already in the boat. Starts, Jesus is sleeping. He wakes up. He calms the storm. Storm 2, Jesus is not with the disciples. They're off on the boat themselves. Jesus walks on the water. That's when you get the Peter and all that stuff.
But both times, he sent them into the boat.
I know, and that's your first point. We're not going to get there yet.
Okay.
Let's keep talking about you. Again,
Pretend I didn't say that.
I'm not a maritime guy. That's not me.
Right,
okay. Yeah. Again, we talked about Lake Sarah, a little bit smaller than Lake Erie, but that is fascinating that they compare Galilee and Erie.
Yeah. I mean, of all the U.S. bodies of water,
it's landlocked, right?
Essentially. It connects to the other Great Lakes.
Yeah.
But through the St. Lawrence Canal.
Oh, wow.
The St. Lawrence Seaway, I guess it is.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that, I mean, it's relatively shallow. Both of them at their deepest points are 200 feet, which is really deep. But I mean, contextually, I mean, like when we're talking about, I mean, like there's just that's at their peak low points or their deepest low points. I guess a peak would be up and a valley would be down, right? So at their lowest points, they're 200, but otherwise they're relatively shallow lakes. Waves kick up quick, storms roll in fast, and both known to be dangerous bodies of water for that reason.
And I think, did you get a chance to show that picture in service? I don't know about if you're.
I haven't found one.
Okay, again, we're recording this on Friday. Yeah. But here's the thing. I mean, it's you grew up literally on that was your backyard.
Correct.
How cool? I mean, that's a cool childhood. I think I had woods and a creek behind my house.
See, that's super cool.
And an interstate. Yeah. So there you go. But Lake Erie, and you said you would see the boats racing in front of
because
the storms.
Because the lake is so big, and I mean, like you've got this panoramic view of the lake.
Are you looking east to west?
And you're right. You're looking east to west. Well, I mean, you're looking north, but you can see east to west, of course. And I mean, you can see the storm rolling in, and it's just like, from that perspective, you can see the storm coming and boats racing to get out of the weather because they know how quickly that lake can get dangerous.
Is there a lot of lakeside? What do they call those properties on the lake?
Yeah,
lakeside properties. Is that what they call
My
them?
Parents live on Lakeside Drive.
Oh wow!
What are the chances?
Oh, wow. Okay, so here's what's cool too. You're talking about the boat. Two things. First of all, have you seen the episode of The Chosen yet? You still haven't seen. Oh my gosh!
You could literally say anything right now, and I would be able to say no.
There was this dragon that was on The Chosen. Well, here's the thing: the best episode, in my opinion, but I think a lot of people agree with me. The last episode 8 of season 3. It ends with this. It ends with the second storm that you're talking about. Okay. It ends with Jesus feeding the 5,000. Yep. Amazing story, and you're like, "Oh, this is awesome!" They're ending the season with the feeding the 5,000. What a great way! But there's more. Yeah. So then Jesus, he goes off and prays, but he says to the disciples, Peter's really angry, and again, this is why The Chosen is really good. They really dive into that Peter's story a little bit better. So when then you get into the boat and you get into the storms, and when Peter is asking, Lord, call me out to you, there's a lot of backstory in there that The Chosen has created, because it's not in scripture, but they created that. So, but gosh, you have got to watch it. A lot of times you see some of those interpretations of the storm and they're a little wonky. They're like, oh great, some splashing on, but they did. And there's behind the scenes videos that you can watch if you download the Chosen app. I'm not getting paid to tell you that. Yeah. But it's just neat because you're telling this story and I've got all these really cool visuals. Yeah. And that's why I like The Chosen, because it really, it brings that to life for you. But yeah, Jesus walking on the water was really cool because they had almost like this floating mat, but it was firm enough that you could walk on it. So he's getting splashes, that are coming. It was just really neat.
I have seen the behind the scenes of that.
Yeah. Pretty cool. They did it in a sound studio in Louisiana and got it really cool. Then it's funny because I had that going through my head. And then while you're preparing this lesson, I'm getting texts from my wife with pictures of literally the Sea of Galilee. Wow. She just got back from a life, trip that she just once in a lifetime. She got the opportunity. I think I've said this before, but to go with our elder Steve Smith.
Back?
She's back. Yeah, she just got back last night.
Oh wow! I thought she didn't get back till tomorrow.
No, she got 1:30 a.m. and then she decided to unpack in our room that I was sleeping in.
Believable.
Perfect. Yeah. Let's do this. Yeah. But anyways, she went with her dad. Just a great time. But they did 4 nights that they stayed in a hotel near the Sea of Galilee. Wow. And gosh, it's just. It was the pictures she was sending back, and then to know that those are tied with our Savior and that He walked those same things. And her, it was a rabbinical tour, meaning you literally got up. You didn't know where you were going to go. You know the area you were going to be in, but you didn't know what you were going to do every day. It was based on the rabbi. So their tour guide, essentially. And I'm pretty sure he knew where he was going. But it was a good lesson in obedience. Like, hey, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how long I'm going to be there. I'm just going to follow him and learn. So they would stop and they would like find a little spot to the group of 30 they were with. They would stop. They would listen to him do a lesson. But they went all over. They finished in Jerusalem. But it was really neat to know that a little body of water was just was a backdrop for these life-changing stories we're still telling today.
Yeah, so. It really is incredible. That's super cool that she got to go do that.
Yeah. So let's back to what you said. Jesus knew the storm was coming, and I think at first glance you say that and you're like, oh wow, why did he send them into that storm?
Right.
Why did he send them into that heartache and that difficulty?
Yep.
Go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, there's a couple things here that I hadn't seen before. And I just feel like in studying these things, like, I don't know, God just reveals it or shows it, you know, you read it in a different way. And that's one of the things that I had read a million times. I just had not put those pieces of the puzzle together, that in both of these stories that we're talking about, Jesus, like in this one, Jesus tells his disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake. Let's get in the boat. And so they get in the boat and they go and they encounter this storm that, I mean, even for professional fishermen, is like, you know, one of these things that has them fearing for their lives. And I mean, so Jesus, creator of heaven and earth, like speaks things into existence and knows everything that happens anywhere ever. Of course he knew that storm was coming, but he also knew the outcome. He knew that there was nothing that could, there's nothing that could stand against. I mean, I think what I said in the sermon is there's no wind and no wave that could stand against his word. And that's, he knew that, obviously, but he wanted them to know that as well. And so I think it's an important lesson that even if you're in a tough spot in life, even if you feel like you're in a storm in life, it doesn't mean that you're not where God wants you to be. Exactly. But it does mean that there's strength to get through it.
And you've said this to us, I mean, as a church family, a whole lot, that, you know, when you choose the path of God, it's not going to be an easy life. I talked about that in my communion. It was funny. I felt like if you knew, because Maria, I just said Maria was in Israel for like 11 days. And so when I'm saying that life is hard, I'm saying that because the 11 days was hard.
I had 5 children.
Exactly. I had a lot of help, and I'm not, and every single ounce of breath that I have every day is a blessing from the Lord, and my children are a blessing from the Lord. But as you know, if you have kids in general and you've lived life is hard. But I'm so glad because he uses those to grow us in him. If I didn't have the blessings of the kids, if I didn't have difficulties and, you know, things that I wouldn't mature, I wouldn't grow. I'd still be stunted in my growth. So do you have 1 Peter 1:7 in front of you?
I don't, but the scripture is basically when you go through these trials, your faith is being tested like gold, like fire purifies gold, and so standing strong through these trials will bring you great honor and glory on the day when Christ Jesus is revealed to the world. Something along those lines, but basically just reiterates that even the trials, even the storms in life, can be used by God to refine us and build our faith. Yeah,
you said your first point. His presence does not equal a lack of storms, but he guarantees the power. That's your sub thing. He guarantees the power.
Right.
It was really good. And there's 2 other things I want to talk about. The first one that you mentioned, Jesus needed rest, because in the first story, he's sleeping. And he's an example of rest for us. And a lot of times, fears rob us of the rest or the peace that we have. So go in a little bit about that. Why'd you bring that up? Why was that?
I brought it up because I had always just seen it as Jesus sleeping in the boat.
Cool, collected.
After a long day. And that I think that's probably partly true because, I mean, I'll tell you, like, I led worship for a long time. I mean, sometimes, multiple services a weekend. Sometimes we go do an event Sunday night or somewhere else. Sometimes we'd be somewhere Friday, then Saturday, then come back and do Sunday here or whatever. As taxing as that can be, as much energy as you feel like you're putting out, like preaching 4 times in a weekend is far more taxing. I don't know why.
Really? Well, you're a little older.
Maybe that's it, but I also have a 2-year-old. I don't know. But so I don't know why, but I get where Jesus is coming from. He's been teaching for a long time, way longer than I ever have. And for sure, the dude is tired. You know, I mean, he's just wiped out. And so in his humanity, he needs the rest. But I don't think that's probably not the whole story. You know, Jesus does stuff intentionally always. And so he's not sleeping through the storm only because he needs rest. I think he's also sleeping through the storm because he's demonstrating the deeper kind of peace even in the middle of the wind and the waves that he wants us to have.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the thing. Jesus should be our example in all things. Right. And here is one thing. There's a storm. He's finding rest. He's finding peace and comfort in that. It was funny that you mentioned, you know, Jesus was tired because we looked through all the pictures this morning on the TV. Marie brought her phone and we airplayed them, and the kids, the 3-year-old didn't last very long, but Amelia was like, "Oh, wow!"
Yeah, I'm sure.
Kept making these noises, and I mean, it was a very strenuous trip. You can ask Steve, and Steve's a marathon runner. And you were climbing mountains all the time, and she showed one picture of them climbing what they think is where he most likely, you know, would go and be alone there around the Sea of Galilee. It just makes sense that that's the place, because a lot of times you think, oh, he just went up this little thing and went away a little bit. No, he had to get up and get away. So they showed this one. This is such a steep thing that for all these tourists, they put in those metal rails just to help you get up there. And so, like, you see these people trying, you know, going up, and Tyler was like, "Wow, that takes a lot, Mommy. Did you do that?" And she goes, "Yes." But it does remind me that Jesus had to be in very good shape. I mean, just to walk his life, and I mean, first of all, first century people had way more exertion of their, you know, but him and his ministry doing so much, and you're right, he's had to be tired. I mean, without a doubt. And here comes to my favorite point of your lesson. It was that the storms mess with our perspective. Yeah. It's not like you go into a storm and everything is still crystal clear and and it does not rock your faith at all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, because it really comes. This is like in the second one when Peter is out on the water and Jesus comes to them walking on the water, and I think that like sometimes we detach that from the context, right? Yeah. And the context there is that they had all of these disciples who are in the boat had literally just sat and been part of Jesus performing this miracle where he feeds 20,000 people miraculously with very little resources.
And not only did they witness it, they participated.
Right, they participated. They were passing out the food. And so these guys who should be like at the top of their faith game are just hours later out in this boat, and here comes Jesus walking to them on the water, and their first thought isn't God is coming to us, it's a ghost, you know? And so all of a sudden, like, the storm skews their perspective of what they really should know. Yeah. And the same thing happens to us, you know, like we really should know who's in control. Yeah. If we objectively look at it, the things that he's done before, the things that we have personally witnessed him doing, if we can, then all of a sudden the bad time hits and the storm hits, and we start to question, and we give breath to the unbelief in our soul. And instead of saying, oh, look, it's God coming toward us, we say silly things like, oh, it's a ghost, or I'm never going to make it through, or God never sees me, or I'm not loved, or if that's really you, God. You know, I mean, all of these things that we know to not be true, but in the midst of the storm, our perspective is skewed. Yeah,
and it's reasonable. I mean,
sure.
It makes a whole lot. I mean, it's not like this was a little easterly gale. I don't know if they have that. Yeah. But actually, probably what people would be westerly. I don't think the storms come from the east.
I don't know.
Anyways, but that's why, I mean, it is my favorite point. And this is not to put you down to say, why isn't your faith bigger in those times? This is more of a, no, let's use it as an opportunity to walk towards Jesus. I think you said that. Help me to walk towards you in faith. And a thing, and another thing too is, build your faith before the storm. Right. That's going to help you with your faith while you're in the storm. So preparing for the storm sometimes, and I think a point that I kind of thought of when I was writing this down is sometimes we bring those storms on ourselves. Yeah. Either a lack of rest, that's one, you know, maybe we know we need rest, but we don't. And then that kind of puts into us a tailspin where anxiety throws in there because you're not getting things done that you wanted to get done and you're blah, 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 blah. but or there's an addiction that you decide you can't, and you continue to go back into that road that brings those storms in your life, sometimes yourself.
I mean, it's like we talked about with Jonah last week. I mean, sometimes you find yourself in a situation that is just out of your control. It has nothing to do with anything you've done. But other times you find yourself in situations that are a direct result of something that you've put yourself in. But these guys, I think it's really, I think it's notable because of the parallel with our life. It's just how these guys went out into the lake. They're on their way to wherever it is, and the storm sweeps in so quickly. That's the way it is in Lake Erie. That's the way it is in the Sea of Galilee. I mean, a storm kicks up really fast, and it can be really dangerous. And I mean, life is the same way. I mean, we're going along, things are smooth, we think things are good, and then bam, all of a sudden, we get news, or we run into this or that, and all of a sudden we go from smooth sailing to literally I can't see through the rain, and the storm is skewing my perspective.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you could look at the disciples again. They just got done with one of probably the biggest ministry highlights of their life, and then boom, the storm hits. So it's not like the cautionary tale to beware, but it is just a reality of our life. They come so quickly. It's a lot of times you don't see, oh, hey, look, 100 yards over there. I can see it coming. I'm going to get ready and strengthen up and bulk up. Or pump up, but really, they just come up so fast, and that's why we encourage people to that daily walk with Jesus is such a thing. It's not Jesus will always be there, and even in our doubt, He is still there. Yep. But if we can make those steps in just a relationship with Him on a daily basis, that's going to prepare our hearts when these storms comes.
No doubt. Well said.
So, I love the one thing you said: fear less and demonstrate our faith more.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully that's probably the thing you want people kind of to last after they hear this lesson.
Because he's faithful even in the storm, and really, I mean, especially in the storm, we see that. And, I know that there are all kinds of people in all kinds of storms, and you feel alone, unheard, unseen. But the reality is, I mean, when we seek God, when we pray to Him, Jeremiah 29, 12, and 13. These are the two verses that follow Jeremiah 11. It says, "I have the plans for a future and a hope." It says, "When you pray, I will listen. If you look to me wholeheartedly, you will find me." And so I think even in the storm, understanding that He hears, and if we look for Him, if we seek Him, we'll find Him.
Yeah. So I encourage you to, after you listen to this podcast, if you get a chance, read those two stories from the New Testament in the Gospels. Read those stories, first of Jesus sleeping in the boat, and then the second one of Him, walking in the storm towards Peter and calling him out. Because again, there's so many lessons that the Holy Spirit, I think, gave to John here in this lesson to hear it from all of us, but I believe that He can do the same to you when you get in that Word and
Absolutely.
you're reading it.
Yep. And you'll find those in Mark chapter 4. Actually, both of these stories are in 3 out of 4 of the Gospels. Not the same 3 out of 4, but you'll find those, specifically the versions I used, in Mark chapter 4 and in Matthew chapter 14.
Okay, there you go. And I think it's by no accident that this hit on Father's Day, because a lot of times Father's Day, it's different. Father's Day is usually a little less attendance-wise here at Central, just because the dads want to go on the physical boat rather than hear about a boat. Yeah. But a lot of times there's just a lot of heartache, with fatherhood. That if you didn't, like I said in the communion, if you had a bad fatherhood or you didn't have a father, hard times are not going to be unfamiliar to you.
Yep.
So this lesson and maybe this was a hard lesson for you to hear, just because maybe your father was the propitiation of that hard in those storms in your life. And just to let you know, I mean, there's still a Savior, and you have a Heavenly Father that is your perfect Heavenly Father, and will never let you down, and will never let you go.
That's really good. Mike Young, I don't know if you remember Mike Young. He posted something the other day just about how his dad walked out when he was a really little kid, and he never had a father figure growing up. And, somehow he found Monica, his wife, who felt like Mike would be, a great, of course, partner in life, but also a great father. And he said, really, God is I'm crediting God the Father for me being any measure of a successful dad.
That's why I did that social media post. If you haven't had a chance to check it out on our Facebook and Instagram, where I just felt a call to hey, fathers get a bad rap in our society a lot. And so I just, thought, wow, why don't we just put why we love our dads? And so I texted a bunch of guys that are in my phone, part of the church family, and said, what's your favorite thing about your dad? And it was neat to get the responses back for those text messages. It's a couple of those guys, they've lost their father. They had a great father, but they lost him. And those fundamentals that they were taught are still there. I mean, it's crazy how work ethic and lessons can be learned even without even saying things.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about your dad?
That's the thing. I was thinking about that when I was texting those guys. My favorite thing about my dad, his compassionate heart. I saw that with my sister. He loved her so well. And I think that's hopefully what I'm emulated the most from him. What about you?
Probably he's a all-in kind of guy. He's a hard worker. I mean, whenever he does something, he doesn't do anything halfway. He's a hard worker. Yeah.
Well, happy Father's Day if you have a father figure in your life. And John,
happy Father's Day to you, Jared.
Thank you.
Dad of 5.
So this is where we're going to transition to our next guests, Michael and Angie Smith. Again, these are some great conversations, and our hope is that they will strengthen you in your faith. When those storms do come, you can say, hey, I remember I heard that story of how Michael and Angie got through their times, and maybe that can be a little of encouragement for you when your storms come. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after their conversation just to get you a little more pumped up and ready for, next week. We'll be right back. Thanks, guys. And we're back with the Central Weekly, episode number 68, and we have 2 very special guests in the podcast studio. I am very excited about this conversation with Michael and Angie Smith. Guys, say hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
So we have Michael and Angie, and you guys have been around Central for a couple years now. Am I right?
Several years, yes.
And I've been wanting to get your guys' story because the obvious thing, you guys are the owners, operators, right?
Correct.
Of Bagels and Brews here in Mount Vernon and in Cesar. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And it's really funny because that's the conversation I wanted to have. But then somebody said, well, they got more than just that to talk about. So I know that when we were kind of coming into this, you guys said, yeah, we've got a lot. We've lived through a lot. And I think that's the key thing of the Central Weekly and telling these stories and bringing people in, the Central family in to have these conversations, because not only can we lean on one another and share, like Remington said last week, about your testimony can influence somebody else's and really change their testimony. And like we say all the time, relationships matter most. And I'm just excited about this conversation. And I'm a little green on you guys. I don't know too much about you. I don't know if that's a motto people say, but so Michael and Angie, let's go back all the way to the beginning. Where'd you grow up? And tell us a little bit about the family that you guys grew up in. Well, Angie, we'll start with you.
I'm from Mount Vernon. I went to school in Mount Vernon, grew up in Mount Vernon. I had a wonderful family that took me to church every Sunday. So I knew what I should do and how I should live. Yeah. When I got older in my teenage years, I kind of drifted away a little bit, kind of became rebellious. I got married when I was 18.
Okay.
I married a man that he knew God, but he didn't follow God.
Okay.
And so we had 2 children. And I took the children to church every Sunday, and he would not go with us. So I just continued to go. After we had been married, we'd been married for a long time.
Yeah.
And in 2014, he was diagnosed with lung cancer that had went to his brain.
Oh, wow.
And so he began to pray and go to church. And he began to follow God. And he passed away in 2018, but I believe that he found God. He would witness to his nurses and his doctors, and there were 7 people that were saved at his funeral.
You're kidding.
So, yeah. Wow. And then I met this wonderful guy after I lost my husband, and God's good.
Yeah, he is. We just went through a lot of years there and a lot of heartache. And we'll kind of, that's the overview of Angie. Michael, and that's why I say that is we'll get back. I don't want to just dismiss those tears. Michael, tell us your story.
From the beginning?
Go. Yeah, you were a baby born in.
I was born in 1963 in Marion, Illinois. My father was an educator.
Yep.
And I grew up in Marion. I was, we're just kind of rough and tumble kid. I played baseball, but I was always drugged to church. I was one of those kids that didn't want to go, but Mamaw and Mom and Dad, we were all big believers. So I was certainly raised in the church.
Yeah.
Of course, as I grew older and through my teenage years, kind of like Angie, I drifted away. I was doing all the things teenagers shouldn't do. And, so then I had a daughter. I was married, and I actually remarried this person. I was married to her 8 years each time.
Oh, really?
And and I wanted to keep my family together.
Yeah.
She was unfaithful each time. And nevertheless, I still believed in family and thought that it could be patched up. And of course, we weren't in the church at the time, and I think that was a big part of all that. I went through a lot of trials and tribulations as well, like Angie. And then I had met a wonderful young lady, Angie Litton, and she... Angie, around the same time, what was interesting was that Angie, she was diagnosed March 8th of this 2013, I believe it was. I got my years mixed up here maybe, but I believe it was 2013. And she passed away December 28th of the same year. So acute myeloid leukemia, it's very aggressive. It's absolutely terrible cancer. And I took care of her, of course. I was a caretaker. And then I she wanted me to raise her son, Blaine. He was a freshman in high school at the time. So Blaine and I became like dad, and he became like my son, and we're still close. Love him to death. He's a teenager now. So we went through that, but while Angie was sick, we had actually went to a benefit for her husband because I worked with her husband, and I didn't know Angie at the time. And my Angie, my fiance, she liked Jon because her and her husband were suffering from the same disease. They both had cancer. And anyhow, it was... they came to Angie's funeral, and it was... cancer's really affected us. I spent 6 months, if not 7 or 8, at the Siteman Center in St. Louis, and watched a wonderful young lady lose everything that she had. And so whenever Angie and I got together, I think the experience of cancer is the reason for it. And so whenever we started, you may not want me to go here, but when we started Bagels and Brews, we both felt that we've got a meaning for this. And we think God's in charge. But sometimes we're not sure, if we're doing the right thing or not. We're listening, and sometimes we're looking for, I think, maybe a clearer direction. At times we question what we're doing, but I think we have something to do here. So
let me get a couple things. What was your husband's name? Your first husband? Jon. And then your first wife was Angie. Okay, let me keep following here. Married on 2 occasions to that Angie. 8 years.
No, she was after that one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the woman I married twice, who was the mother of my child, was Cindy Smith. Yeah, and then many years had passed, and
what was Angie's maiden name?
Litton.
Okay, so that's why. And now the Angie Litton that I was assuming just was the Angie Litton that I know from Central.
Oh, okay.
Am I right, Angie Litton?
I think there's two. There was 2 Angie Littons.
Okay. Angie's the Litton's lady for Litton's ambulance. Okay, see, that's where I'm getting a little clear now. Now I'm on board. And so that really, so she was your fiance when she passed. And so you're going into this, I mean, I wanted to say not even as a married man to her, but you're seeing her through her cancer journey there at the Siteman Center 6 months on end as her fiance. Okay. So let's go a little bit back. How has, you said you both grew up in church. Why do you think those rebellious teenage years came in for both of you? Because you're about the same age, right?
He's a little older than me.
You like how I did that? So why do you think that? Why? Because that's always a question. We would talk to Shauna a couple weeks ago. She was the same way. Great Christian home. She had her difficulties with her parents, like you said. But those rebellious years always seem to come with the teenage years. Any insights on that from you guys?
I feel like it's the friends you have, the people you associate with, and a lot of the people that were my age, we were all wild at that time, and so I feel like that's what it was. I think I just chose the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
For me.
And then do you think, how do you because it's so, gosh, I'm trying not to do this, but I'm hearing your story, and again, just kind of hearing it the first time with our listeners, with a lot of people that may know you guys, but not know a lot of your history. And I keep hearing my parents. My mom married young, got a divorce young, had rebellious teenage years, and my dad, he passed the cancer, and he was like Angie, your husband, in the fact that he went to church. My dad was a godly man, but just that relationship with God just wasn't there. He came to church, but it was later in his life when he just softened him, and when he was seeing that death was right there, and he saw all the people helping my mom and helping us as a family and showing up at benefits, and that's what softened him, and that's what I believe really brought him to the feet of Jesus when he came to the end of his life. And I apologize if I do that too much in this conversation, just because I see that so often with cancer, that it does one of two things. It's either hardens that person to the point where they're just shut off, and they usually pass a little earlier in their cancer journey because there's no hope there. But then there's the other side of the people that it softens them. It really, those fruits of the Spirit just start to blossom right there at the end of their life. It's sad that it happens then, but that happens a lot. What do you talk about that a little bit for me?
For us, it was like a total change for our family when he got sick and he turned to God, because we would go places and he would ask people, do you go to church, and when we would go to Siteman's, he would tell his doctors and nurses, God's going to heal me. And they, I don't think they really knew what to say to him when he would say that, but he was very bold about it. And I believe God did heal him, just not in our way, in his way.
It's by no accident that this week for the church family, Jon's lesson is Jesus and the storm. And he's talking about the storms of our life. And that's the thing, I can't imagine, this life is hard enough. And I can't imagine of those people that don't have Jesus, that don't have that anchor in there or that hope. And how do they get through cancer journeys? How do they get through the loss of a loved one or the loss of a child or, car accidents and all this stuff that we deal with on a daily basis, but that everybody deals with. But for you guys, I just love it that those storms didn't shipwreck you. Maybe it did for a little while, but you got back on the ship and God really brought your journeys together. And I just think that's incredible to watch. So, or to listen to. What are some of those things, some of those life lessons maybe that you learned during those times that you really have say, okay, those are concrete lessons that I will always remember since I've been through that?
Oh, goodness. Some of those lessons that, I wouldn't really wish upon anyone, because it's, after Angela had passed, I can remember many days driving to work, because I'm an engineer by day, if you will. And I had a 30-40 minute drive to work. And there's lots of times that for a long time, I just cry because witnessing someone suffer. But, boy, I tell you what, it's, I really did a lot of praying. Yeah. That was it. Just a lot of praying, and still even to this day, I still, like Angie, she got emotion there about Jon and stuff, and it's this cancer, what her and I have seen. We believe we have a cause, and one of our big things is, and I don't want to get into this too much here, but everybody asks me, well, do you want to be profitable in your coffee shop? And is this all about money? And the answer is, what I want to do is I would like to supplement retirement. Yeah. But what I want to do more is to give money to cancer research. Yeah. And she feels the same way about that. It's like, you know, you can't take anything with you, so let's give something away, you know. So I want to be very successful, and I want to give it away. Yeah. You know, not that I don't want some. I want to supplement our retirement. I want to live, you know, we're probably pretty good now, but you want to be sure as you get older, you never know. So kind of hedge against the weather that way, but for sure, we want to help people.
So let's talk coffee. This is the good conversation. What brought you into the coffee field? I think you guys were small business owners even before the coffee shop. So talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe even give us a little insight into that entrepreneurial leadership that you guys have been through, and why coffee. And take us to the ground floor.
Well, after my husband passed away, I bought a house in Cesar. So, of course, we live in Cesar. And he makes some awesome bagel sandwiches. And we both love coffee.
Well, I didn't want to move to Cesar. You need to tell that part of the story.
So
Angie, I had my own house. I wanted her to move to my home, but it's like, I'm not leaving my daughter who lives in Cesar. So you'll move to Cesar. So I thought, God's gave me one more opportunity here at someone wonderful. So I guess I'll move to Cesar.
So he makes these awesome bagel sandwiches, and there was a lot at the corner in Cesar across from the custard stand that was like these concrete things. It just looked terrible. And so just jokingly, we said, we should start a coffee shop there. Well, before I knew it, he had called the person that owned it, asked them if they would sell it, and they said, give us a couple days and we'll call you back. So I was like, well, she's probably not going to sell it, you know. And God had other plans, because she called back and she said, I will only sell it to you if you will buy all 3 of my lots. So we actually own the rental house next to the bagel shop, because that was part of our deal. But it was a deal that was an unbelievable deal. And so I think that was the first step of knowing, okay, God, what are you doing here, you know? And
yeah, because I didn't think at the time I wanted to work 24 hours a day. I felt pretty much, 16 was enough.
And so Michael, I mean, this isn't your only job. What was?
No.
Yeah. Tell us about what you do full time.
Well, I graduated from Southern Illinois University, engineering, mechanical engineering, and I used to co-own Lay's Mining Service here in town. I was there for 22 years, and then I sold out. I don't even know when, 2008, ish, and went to work for Murray Energy as an engineer for them. I'm actually back as an employee at Lay's now, so that's my day. So
full circle
engineering job. I'm glad to be back there. They're like family to me, and it's a good fit. But nevertheless, it's when we got into this coffee thing, it was what a ride it's been. We've worked our tails off. We literally work. Last night, I told Angie, I said, I've got some new Indonesian coffee in. It's really good. I've got to roast some of this. And so I roasted it, and I said, I'm going to grind this. I've got these sample packs. I want to give some coffee away. I want people to taste this coffee. And it was, what time was it? 9:30, 10 o'clock last night. I was packaging coffee and trying to get it ready for the morning. So 5 this morning, she was helping me package the rest of it and deliver it. So that's kind of a typical day for us. But that's
what year did the store in Cesar start?
2020.
2020. Gosh, it seems longer than that. Maybe to you guys too. And here's the cool thing: our Grace McDowell now. So she was a big part as your manager, right?
She had, I think she contacted us. And she's been wonderful for us. She's just been awesome. And then when she was pregnant with Scarlett, then she decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And then Mike has roped her back in, so she does all our social media for us.
I didn't know she was back in the game.
I won't leave her.
That's cool.
I won't leave her alone.
We just love her to death. She's awesome.
I mean, you guys, just talking with your baristas that are here on site, and we'll get into a little bit about that. But just you guys do create a good family atmosphere. It looks like a lot of fun in there, as much as stressful as it can be. It's just a lot of fun. And then because I think a lot of people underestimate how leadership in small businesses can really affect other people. And when you have a mission mindset to your small business, that really can change a lot of things for the kingdom of light around here, especially when you're doing things ethically and you're doing things where you're trying to benefit other people, not just yourselves. And like Mike, I think you said it, it's a good point. You want to be successful. And I think there's sometimes in the Christian world, we're a little bit like, oh, we don't want to say that because then that kind of puts the spotlight on me, or we're asking for God's blessings. It's like, no, but I'm going to use that for his glory in the end. And I think that's how we have to be more advantageous in our goal setting, I think, a lot of times, because when our goals align with his goals, we want his blessing, because that's what that's going to get a lot of things changed in a lot of people's lives. So so everything's going well. People are traveling to the little town of Cesar to get these amazing bagel sandwiches. I agree. Coffee's great. I love the coffee. But the bagel sandwiches are like, that's what makes me do the drive. Okay, I'll go for the coffee, but like I'll go the long distance. It's like 15 minutes. It is funny how a lot of people are like, oh, you go all the way to Cesar, but like if you live in a big town, you travel 20 minutes to go anywhere around town. But just a side note, and it is kind of cool that Cesar right there is. Do you get a lot of tourism just into Rend Lake a little bit too?
The summer times are our busiest times because there's so many campers, and it's just a little in town. Like last night I was outside watering flowers, and of course the custard stands all the way to the road, and people are just everywhere, and it's a cute, quaint little town.
And I think it's funny because I think a lot of little towns, they're understanding how significant and successful those small just custard stand type, ice cream stands, shout out to Yale and Helen's too. And just how if you do things well and you create an environment where people feel loved and cared for, and you have good food, that's going to bring people in. And it's nice to see that around a lot of times. So now let's talk about this. So you started this mini concept coming into Mount Vernon. Tell us about the first mini.
Well, actually,
you were in Cesar first. You were in.
Well, we kind of, we were doing.
About the same time, yeah.
Well, after we decided, Remax actually approached us.
Oh, okay.
And had this idea that they wanted us to be in a building with them because they felt like that it would give them a chance to have people come in that they could talk to.
Yeah.
And I think it was around the same time that we were talking with the church also. And so it was really exciting for us, but then it was kind of a little bit stressful because I also work too.
Yeah.
I'm also the bookkeeper at Waltonville School District. So
there's your full-time job.
That's my full-time job. So then we were trying to figure out how to the balance of, taking care of 3 shops. But I just think God's been so good to us.
Yeah.
And we are just so happy to be here at Central.
Yeah. So I think that's the fun thing, because in my past life here at Central, Connections pastor, I've always said, why does Central not have a coffee shop? And because churches our size have always had some like that, and it's made a difference. And even, we had a coffee shop. Originally, when 2004, when they built the worship center, they had a coffee shop. It was downstairs in the cafe, of all places. But because when we started coming in 2010, it was still functioning, still working. I remember Randy Sells, he would do closing announcements, and he would say, hey, and stop by. We're having turkey sandwiches down in the coffee shop tonight. Stop by before you go. And we actually did that. But it's not a good location. I'd like to talk to the engineers about that. Because I think originally they were going to put it kind of there by that front door. Then it just got moved down, and I don't know the whole story there. But I just know that there was a history there. And they had the idea of the coffee shop even before coffee got really popular. Coffee's always been popular. But I'm saying 2004 and up, it got really popular. So that was always and then why didn't we get that? And then it was funny because, I was over guest services, and I just saw the need for our volunteers to, man those coffee air pots, and how exhausted they would get because it was, and you guys are figuring this out right now. There is just a need for constant coffee during the weekend.
Boy, these guys, they drink a lot of coffee here.
And so really, I was just exhausted doing that with guest services, and it was working, but we're just if we could just have some, even employees. And so I think it was John that came to you guys and just said, hey, let's work out a deal to get this, Bagels and Brews mini in the cafe, or in the center here. And again, the center's worked out really well because that was an unused spot. We don't use the kitchen that much. And so tell us a little bit about how that went, and kind of get into that. Why did you guys say yes to that?
Okay, I can answer that. So yeah, Jon, he approached me at church, and I thought I was in trouble. I didn't know, but and I talked to Angie about it. I said, well, let me talk to Angie. I think we probably will do it, but let me talk to Angie. Of course, I talked to Angie. She said, well, we can't say no.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we can say no. She said, it'd be like telling God no. And I said, I think you're right. This is our purpose. God's asked us into the church.
Yeah.
We're absolutely doing this. So we both agreed to do it. And Central has been a blessing to us. People here have treated us really well. We're so thankful. And I tell you what I found interesting about it was that I don't know if it was you or if it was Jon or the collaboration between the two of you or who, but Jon had mentioned to me, he said, hey, the thing is we want people to stay. We want conversations to take place at the church. We want, because we feel that's a chance for people to get to know each other and get closer and build relationships that matter most, and that's exactly what's happened. I mean, I come out there and I see people having conversations for 15 minutes over a cup of coffee. And, is our coffee that good? No, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. But the point is people are having conversations here in the church. And I think I hope that it's benefited not necessarily Central, but God and the purpose that we're called for. So.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important reason for coffee. Coffee brings people together. To have an intentional way that we did that, and just to know that you guys is your heart. I mean, and we said this when you guys first started. Some people might have raised some eyebrows. Oh, we're bringing a for-profit company to set up shop in a church. That seems like Jesus would be turning over the tables on that. I agree that he would be turning on the tables if you were trying to say, hey, before you go into worship, you have to buy this coffee. We're not trying to do that. And you guys have stated from the very beginning, you're really not making a lot of profit from this. They're going right back into a lot of investments that you guys want to make, a lot of gifts that you guys want to make. So talk a little bit about that too, about if you can, where the money goes.
Absolutely.
Well, our coffee bags have, it talks about that a percentage of our profits will go to someone to help benefit them. And we were able to write our first check for someone. Wasn't a whole lot, but it was something, and that was a start. And so that was a really good feeling to be able to. It's a family with cancer, and he has throat cancer, and so we was able.
Yeah, it's a local resident assessor, and the interesting thing, I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I'm a very transparent person, but I don't know if the check was $300 or $400. It was somewhere in there. But let me say this: it's nothing close to what we want to do. And so, and what we do, it's from our coffee sales, from our bags of coffee. So 1/2 of the profit we make, she tabulates it, puts it in a spreadsheet, and when we feel that we get enough. Now, the thing is, we just really have started this, so we're just starting. And I've got a lot of cool things working right now for coffee. I've got something that's big, hopefully. If that goes, then
we'll be able to give a lot more.
We're going to write some checks.
Yeah, and I think, and again, blessing so you can be a blessing to others. And I think the young girls that are your baristas, it's really neat to see them. Some of them didn't go to church, maybe, or in a church setting. Now they're listening to the message in the center all the time. And 2 of the girls, they even sang in the 8:00 service. They go to another church, and Kevin, who is an avid coffee drinker, wanted them, Kevin Chastain, to come in and sing a song. And I love that, because again, that's a family atmosphere. And that's what we want to be as a church. Go ahead, Angie.
And that is kind of how we've been. Like, these girls were 16 when we hired them. And Audrey, she works here at the church almost every Sunday. She's getting ready to leave us to go to SIU.
Oh, man.
And so it's kind of a hard parting for us, because she's been so good for us. She's been our manager at Cesar since Grace left. And she, has sent us a little text message just saying that this is not easy on her to leave us. And so that's a good feeling, know. And we were able to give some scholarships to these girls. When they graduated high school, we were able to do that. And so that's been awesome to be able to do stuff like that for them. And we just hope we've made a difference in their life, So
It's pretty cool. And it's, again, I love your guys' heart, and I hope that people that are listening to this conversation can understand your heart behind the coffee, behind making a frappuccino for somebody. That's an invitation. It's like why we wear T-shirts, why we put Central's name on a T-shirt. It's a conversation starter, because we want to have those relationships that last. Not just, and a lot of times people are going to be getting their coffee somewhere before they come to church. Might as well get it while they're here and in the building. And that was the thing I told John too. Maybe to get them a little, on time to church. I don't know, but a lot of times I've seen people standing in line while church has started, and I'm like, you should have got here sooner. You should have got here sooner.
Or our baristas should maybe be fashionable. They do a wonderful job.
They do a good job.
In fact, they do. The funny thing about that is that and Angie and I, we get out of the way, because the thing is I can make some nice latte art. I can do, but I'm not any good at it. I'm not fast. These kids, they just smoke us, So it's usually, Mike, get out of the way, please. Just make the coffee and get out of our way. Let us do our thing.
And let's talk coffee one more time. Are you roasting your own beans? Is that right too?
Yes.
And is that done at the Cesar location?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's a smelly process, the roasting, isn't it?
I love it. Yeah.
Just stays with you. Mike just always smells like coffee. Michael and Angie, before we get to our last question, let me ask you one more, kind of going back to our original conversation about losing spouses and having basically a brand new life. What's been the most challenging thing about having a new life with a new spouse, but also having all of that, but not wanting to not disrespect any of that, but also respect that history, but bring into a new future for you guys? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for us, because we've both been through the same things, we've both taken care of someone that suffered. It's easy for us to talk about it. Things pop up, memories pop up, and we talk about it, and we both understand. Yeah. So.
There's like I said, there's no room for jealousy or what I miss out on or anything else. Like I said, in our home, we've got a wall where there's pictures, and there's pictures of Angie's family before me, and they had many years. She was married to John for 32 years, and they raised two very wonderful kids, wonderful kids, and of course I have a daughter of my own who I raised, who was a wonderful young lady, but in our home is pictures of both of our past, and then they come together to now, and the thing is that there's no room to disrespect anything. It's just I've been given a chance, an opportunity to from here forward, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, and I think there's a lot of people like you that have felt, okay, maybe I've been divorced, or maybe I've lost a spouse, and my life, in essence, is over. Like that purpose that I did have, that love that I did have, is done. So that's the thing that. Here's why I'm most grateful for your conversation. You've picked up the pieces. God has put pieces in your life, and you've ran in new directions that have been so beneficial to other people around you. And that's just been inspiring to listen to and to watch and to kind of see you guys on the weekends too. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for this conversation. But we're not done.
Thank you.
We're not done. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back to ask the question that we ask all of our guests on the Central Weekly. How has God been working in your life lately? So we're going to talk about the now in just a couple seconds. We'll be right back. We're back with the Central Weekly to wrap up our conversation with Michael and Angie Smith. It's been a good conversation so far, so let's continue this. So the question is, how has God been working in your life lately? Ladies first.
Hard one. I feel like God's always working in our lives.
Yeah.
He's possibly given us an opportunity to maybe expand, which would help us being able to help more people. And God's always just good.
Yeah.
He's always good.
Yeah.
I tell you what, you have no idea what God has done in my life lately.
Yeah.
Because things that I haven't talked about was, after Blaine's mother had passed away, I wasn't coming to church.
Yeah.
I was going to bars, and it was going the wrong direction. God grabbed her and pulled me, saved me, basically, and put me back on the path that I should be on. I believe that completely. But I believe what has God done for me lately, is doing in my life, is He's given me very big challenges, and I'm very stubborn. So is Angie, and I think He gave it to the right people, because we both have a passion for cancer. We're going to raise some money, and hopefully we can help some people, because, like I said, we've seen it. We've been there. I know Angie had trouble. I worked with her late husband, so I knew Jon, and cancer's expensive. People need help, and there's not enough help out there for them. So I think that's it.
Yeah. And I think it's almost like, because I mean, when my dad passed in 2017, that's the years when benefits were the big thing. And it's almost like we've gotten benefited out. I don't know if you guys feel that way too, but it's like, oh, another benefit. I mean, because there's so many people that have cancer that we almost get a little diluted in our thinking on this, but the need is almost even greater than it was a couple years ago when benefits were more. But so it's just neat that God's given you guys a creative outlet to do this and to impact so many people in terms of a small business like this, on top of doing your full-time jobs. So you guys are probably tired. Angie Smith, thank you so much for stopping in. It was great to hear. And Michael, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's super cool to see the right people get these big challenges from the Lord and accept them and move them and benefit the people around them in such big ways. So it's a good conversation. Thank you. I know it was a little hard. So
yeah, it was a good conversation.
And that's it for episode number 68 of the Central Weekly. A big thank you once again to Michael and Angie Smith for sitting in. It's hard to tell those stories sometimes. It was funny because I was sitting across from them and I saw so many similarities with my parents, and just the divorce and the heartache of losing a parent, how they've gone through that. It was just, gosh, I love to hear people tell how God has got them through.
Yeah. So. And then to see their, I guess, like intimate involvement with the ministry of Central now, and just like this season that we're in, and like partnering with them and their faithfulness in executing that. I really appreciate both of them.
Yeah, there are a good example of making relationships matter most. So we'll see you back here next week, episode 69 of the Central Weekly. We're going to be working at week 4 of Boats, which is all aboard.
Yeah, what a great play on words that is, Jared. Good job.
That was all you. I want to take no credit for that. And did you tell the schooner joke this weekend? Are you going to tell it? Yeah. A schooner is a small sailboat.
I would like to know, anybody out there, did you know what a schooner is? Because I feel like anybody who's seen Pirates of the Caribbean, which I've also never seen, but I do know what a schooner is. I feel like that's kind of a pirate thing, like a schooner. Yeah. But regardless, Carol Rodofsky, do you know what that is? Carol is a faithful listener. She listens to these every week. She told me the other day. So
text me, Carol.
Everybody, thank you for listening. But do you know what a schooner is?
And with that, we're going to bon voyage our way out of here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See you next week, guys. Thanks for listening.